running for the hills in the pandemic and Zoom meetings, I really feel honored to be able to give this initial presentation live. And I want to start with something that's really important to my heart. I want to offer my personal, and hopefully you as well sharing the sentiment, my personal appreciation and thank you to the elected board members, the committee chairman, the volunteers who have strived for the last 2.5 years to keep this goat alive, right? You know, we all belong to organizations, and a lot of organizations did not survive this. And to all of the people that I'm speaking to, thank you. The reason that we're here today is because of you. You've kept the goat alive, and now we're going to go on to bigger and better things. So thank you for everything you've done. All right. I've got a little slideshow. It's going to run over here. It's not the main point of my talk, but I'm going to refer to some of the images as they come up, and it's just going to run for about 40 minutes. And the talk, it says elegant boxes, but really what and I'll get to boxes. Where I want to start is generalize that concept into, let's call it elegant woodworking, and I want to share with you some of my approach as I design and build these little boxes. And I think that they should be applicable to everybody in whatever form of woodworking you do, whether you're making tables or chairs or sideboards. And there are some, so these are going to be images with pictures of my little things that I make. And hopefully they exemplify the topics that I'm going to talk about. In my mind, elegant woodworking involves some basic fundamental principles that are transferable across the domain of all of our work, right? There is the concept of form and function, and the concept of proportion. Proportion in my mind being, you know, that the pieces are sized relative to each other so that they look harmonious to your eye. And as these slides go through, I ask you to use your own eye and judge the sense of proportion on these things that I've made and the pieces I've brought up here. This little box, if these legs had been twice as thick, right, it just wouldn't look right. There are some mathematical formulas that can help you with proportion, the golden ratio, 1 to 1.6. I sometimes start with those things, but it's really about training your eye. So form and proportion are really important. And attention to detail relative to color and texture of the woods goes a really long way towards elegance. The general rule of thumb that I follow is that you're not trying to make a stew with 9 different ingredients, right? To my eye, elegant woodworking looks best if there's 2, maybe at the most 3 species of wood that are being used. And the colors are harmonious to each other. And again, I ask you to judge that in these slides. And it's not just the colors, it's also the use of the colors. My design aesthetic is to always make the carcass kind of like disappear. It's not the showpiece, right? And since I make mostly boxes with drawers, is my niche. The drawer is kind of the showpiece, right? And so I'll select the elegant timber for the drawer front. In this case, it's bird's eye maple, and this is cherry, mahogany actually. And then the body, the carcass, the structure wants to have that form and proportion that I talked about, but it wants to kind of hide and be subservient, right, to the focal point. And there's I think a really spectacular example coming up in the slide that I refer to. So it's form and proportion, color, and use of that color. If this box was bird's eye maple for the body and mahogany for the drawers, it's the same exact box, but the same exact woods, right? But they're reversed in their use, in how they come across to your eye. This box right here, Starburst, that I built, I think is a classy example of the use of color and making the color in the right places. This is a spectacular piece of curly olive that I bought, and I resawed, book matched. Fortunately for me, I still have 2/3 of that board waiting someday to be explored, right? And that obviously wanted to be the showpiece. And so, you know, that sat on my workbench for like 6 months, looking at me saying, what am I going to do with this? How am I going to make something harmonious out of this? And I hit upon using Swiss pear for the body. And Swiss pear, if you used it, is kind of like the homogeneous, no grain wood. It's just flat, right? Beautiful color, matches the drawer front. And so when you look at this box, the sides and the body form, they have a function, but they sort of disappear, right? And your eye is captivated by the colors of that beautiful curly olive. So again, if those colors had been reversed, obviously that wouldn't work, right? So I want you to consider when you're approaching your next woodworking project and you're going to make a sideboard, to consider some of those elements of form, proportion, and color. And then you can get really down in the woods when you start talking about figure and grain, right? So flat sawn wood with the big spectacular figure has a use, right? But that wouldn't have looked well on this box, right? It would have been distracting. Rift sawn wood, 45 degrees, that when you plane it in that direction, you end up with straight lines, right? So that's kind of a preferred material for like drawer fronts that you don't want to be distracting. This happens to be wangy. So it was chosen as a contrast to the rest of the box. When you open those doors on Starburst, there's this amazing black color, right, looking at you, straight grain, and humbly to my eye, the piece becomes harmonious that way, right? If this had been quilted maple, it wouldn't have worked. The quilted maple, being so spectacular on its own, would have distracted from what I was trying to show through design as the doors on this little box. A note about scale. It's hard to know scale in pictures. There's nothing in any of these images bigger than this, okay? So I work at a box scale. And you know, well, is that 3 feet tall? How big is it? This is about the largest piece that I'll make. Is about like that. So everything's in smaller scale. So that's part of elegant. The other part that cannot be understated is the spirit of the maker and your willingness to go and, oh, here's my little workshop. That's the first piece of furniture I ever made. That's 2x4s from the Home Depot about 25 years ago. I wanted to make my own workbench, and that's what I ended up with. It's still there. I took that picture 2 days ago. And when I say the spirit of the maker, what I'm talking about is it in you to take the time to get the details right? A common comment when people explore the things that I make, granted they're small, and so it's not like I have to spend, it's not like this isn't a great big huge bureau, right? But a very common comment, which gives me a lot of pride, is, wow, all the details are right. All the edges are nice and softly broken. The joints are level. Things are smooth. And I have a mental construct that I call the 6-foot rule and the 6-inch rule. You can walk up on some work and be 6 feet away from it, and it just looks great. It's got nice form. It's well proportioned. Nice use of the woods. But you watch out, and you walk up to it and you start observing it closely and touching it, and it's not tactile. It hurts your fingers. There's gaps. Things aren't exactly level. And what that tells me, and I say this very humbly, is that the maker had 2/3 of the equation figured out. Right? They had a nice design. They used some good words. They were well selected, but they didn't take the time to hand sand, to plane, to make sure things are proper. And in that regard, I submit to you that you have to be comfortable with not only your power tools, but your hand tools, right? You can only go so far with power tools. This next slide, this little box right here, I want you to observe these legs, how they look, as built. The next slide shows those legs when the power tools ended, and then the hands took over, okay? And they're rough. They don't look anything like what they look like right there. And I tell you that I'm a modern woodworker. I have electricity, and I'm a big believer in power tools. To me, power tools are wonderful because they are a time saver, right? They allow me to take a piece of rough wood and make it S4S quickly. I can cut joints. I can do, basic manipulations of the wood to get it into a raw form. And when I say raw form, it's somewhat of a refined raw form. But at that point, the power tools stop. So these are the same legs. These are those legs, right? I took those legs picture when I made departure, and they're sitting on my little piece of plywood that I have for a table to work on, and you can see some various hand tools. I brought some examples of those hand tools in. That's as far as power tools can take you, in my opinion, in my judgment, in elegant woodworking. And at that point, you need to have practiced and developed the skills to be able to refine work so it meets the harmony and the objective of your design, even if it's a design that someone else made. I want to pass around an example right here, just for you to feel with your hands. These are two identical drawers. These happen to be router-assisted drawer lock joints. They're the same drawers here. For this design, I'm always building new boxes to sell. So this drawer is as far as power tools can take you. When this touches your hands, I want you to feel it. Close your eyes. You'll notice joints that aren't level. You'll notice sharp, angular, right? This drawer, same drawer for a different box. A power tool did not touch this from that. I sat in a little chair in the corner of my shop. You'll see a picture of my chair. I sat in a chair, little hand plane, sandpaper, files, and I converted the machined rough thing into something that I would submit, and I ask you to challenge me on this when that comes around, is elegant, right? It's smooth, it's clean, it's clear, and you can't do that, in my opinion, if you shy away from taking a plunge and trying to use a few basic hand tools, right? So I recommend, if that's all new to you, you get a little block plane. This happens to be a Lie-Nielsen low-angle block plane. I use this to cut the radius at the front of that little box in highly figured woods. This is razor sharp, right? This is a little Lie-Nielsen shoulder plane. There are some tools that do one job and they do it perfectly, right? I would submit that a VIX bit for making sure that your screws that go into the center of your hinges are a tool that does only one job but does it perfectly. And this is another. So a lot of my work employs small-scale mortise and tenon joints. So this is a mortise and tenon joint. The little pull is attached to the lid with the mortise and tenon. Obviously, the mortise is in the lid. And I cut the mortise with the 1/8 inch spiral router bit, power tool, right? And I cut the tenon on my table saw using a rip blade, so it's flat ground, right? Which gives me the tenon, cut both sides. It's a tenon. You can't cut the tenon on your table saw to 124 thousandths of an inch thick. It won't happen. You'll drive yourself crazy. So I'll cut the tenon to close. Maybe it's 132 thousandths, whatever. And then I sit in my chair with this little Lie-Nielsen shoulder plane, 3 or 4 strokes on both. It takes off about 1/2 of a thousandth of an inch per pass, right? 3 or 4 strokes, fit it, won't fit, couple 3 more strokes. Eventually, the mortise and tenon will fit perfectly. I can hold it upside down without glue. And that whole process takes about 2 minutes. I challenge anyone to think that you could do that using a power tool and a power tool only. And part of achieving elegant woodworking, in my judgment, is the confidence to be able to pick up a hand tool, the practice of doing so, and the ability to refine, right? So it's all about refinement. That's one of my favorite little boxes right there, Viking. So in general, applicable to all woodworking, the general, in my mind, overall method of work to end up with refined work. I would take exception to wood turning, with all due respect to my instructor Matt here. I haven't found a way on my little teeny-weeny lathe to use 3 different pieces of wood at the same time, right? So maybe wood turning might be outside of the scope of what I'm saying, perhaps, unless you're making sed-made bowls like some of our members do. But in general, my approach to any woodworking project is develop a design that has the fundamentals of these elegant principles, proportion, form, and so forth, and then select the materials I want to use. I have a lot of designs that I've created over the years. This little book is one of 3 that I have filled with notes. And when I find something that works, I'll take the time to detail it in my little sketchbook. And this contains hundreds of like crazy ideas, right? You know, that I think about. I drive down the road and I see a bridge, and I'll come home and sketch the bridge, right? You know, things like that. But I refer back to this, and the having the ability to document these designs, everything that I've made are my designs, right? I came up with them on my own. I'm inspired by a lot of things. So pick a design that you're comfortable with. You know, I've probably made 100 examples of this style little box. And the very first one I made doesn't look anything like this, right? So there's an evolutionary process to the design. This little box here, soaring. It's the first one I ever made. I made this box. I don't know when I made this box. I'll tell you. Let me look at the bottom of it. I made this particular box in 2003, 19 years ago, Ash and Wengi. And you'll notice on the slideshow, there's a couple of little boxes there. There's one. I need to pause for the chair. That's the most important tool in my shop, and I say that unequivocally. And once I get that drawer to the rough state, or anything, a drawer, a carcass, a leg, whatever part I'm making, I go sit in that chair. I got some planes and some sandpaper and some rasping files sitting right here, and I'm always happy. See, I'm always happy in the chair. And I'll sit there for an hour and a half, right? And just refine until it's good, right? And then I'll move on to the next part. And I spend more, my wife is here, so I hope this doesn't sound wrong. I spend more time sitting in that chair than I do standing in front of my tools, right? In the manufacturing and building of a wooden object. And it's that spirit of the maker thing, right? I am not satisfied with a rough edge, a joint that doesn't match, something that's not exactly clean. If there's a little nick, I'll stand there until I about sand a piece of wood away, right, to get rid of the defects. And that, I humbly say, is a mark of the elegance that we should try to put into our woodworking projects, in my opinion, if that's what you're trying to achieve, right? So the chair is really important. So back to the overall process, get a good design. Use your power tools and machine all the parts to final size, shape, whatever that might be. Dry fit them all together. Make sure everything works. Anything that needs to be refined before it's assembled, you do so at that time. You saw those legs for departure, how rough they were. I couldn't put them on the side of the box in that shape, in that condition, and then eventually try to refine them, right? So there's a lot of time in the chair, making things right. Use all your hand tools, whatever you need. And now I have rough parts that I've refined to like 150 grit in general, okay? Now they're all rough parts. Dry fit it. Make sure everything fits. Anything that you can't get to after construction for finishing, I pre-finish. The backs of these little boxes. If I have time, I'll talk about finishing. A lot of you know the finish I use. I popularized it on the internet probably about 15 years ago, and it's used by people all over the world for this kind of work. It's a single 1 pound cut of de-waxed blanche shellac, buffed hard. And then 3 coats of the oil finish that I came up with is what this finish is. Well, I can't get the shellac on the back after I've put the box together because it's in the corners, right? So I'll pre-finish the back, for example. I pre-finish the pulls independently. I pre-finish the drawer. So sometimes parts are finished when they get assembled, sometimes they're not. You have to use your own judgment. If you're making a table, you probably want to assemble the table before you finish the parts, right? So it's really up to you in the specific nature of your work, but pre-finish what you need to, glue everything together, and that's where what Matt has right now, those 2 drawers, that's where you have to challenge yourself as to just how elegant do you want this to be. I could use that drawer, that's curly maple drawer, as it and thicken in a box, and it will fit, and it will be functional, and it will be the right form, and it'll be right proportion. It'll hit 80% of what I'm talking about. but it doesn't ring the bell in that it's not refined, right? And again, I have to emphasize that that's up to you, right? You know, you have full control over your willingness to take the time in the chair or your equivalent, couch, sofa, whatever you have, to take things from machine made to human made. And I like to think of those as human made. They have that touch that a machine just can't accomplish for you, right? So after you glue everything together, you do whatever you still need to, then you apply your finish and you're done. And that step-by-step methodical approach, in my judgment, applies to all the woodworking we do. It can be applied across the spectrum of domains of things that we enjoy, from Ron Clemens' little toy cars, another shout out for Toys for Tots, to wood turning, which I'm trying to learn. You'll have a picture here in a minute of my little wood turning center. Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite cabinets. I built that, some cherry and spalted maple, and it was just looking gorgeous to go somewhere in the house, and it became a router bit cabinet. It sits over my router table that I made in my workshop. That's a pretty elegant router cabinet, right? Even the furniture and the things I have hanging on the wall in my shop, I've tried to apply the same principles because I go down there to have joy, right? And to enjoy my time and to have fun with it. And so I figured, hey, you know, I'm a woodworker. I can make a nice looking router bit cabinet. There it is. It's still hanging in my shop. It has a lot more router bits. That picture is probably 10 years old. Hope that resonates. I'm going to pause at this point before I get into boxes with any questions that anybody might have. We good? Yeah. So for those on Zoom, Mark was speaking about affirming his input on the fact that there is a joy in using hand tools. That there's a learning curve, right? You're not going to pick up a Lee Nelson shoulder plane and make a perfect tenon the first time. You're going to have to mess around with it a little bit, but there's a payoff at the end, in that I know going into if I made this box again tomorrow, I know in advance with 100% confidence it's going to turn out really nice. And that's not because I'm a skilled woodworker. It's because I've developed a methodology, then an approach, and I know how to use the hand tools to correct any mistake. And I've never made anything in its raw form that hasn't been full of mistakes, right? So you have to be confident in that, Mark. So thank you for that comment. Yes, Mark affirmed as well that these concepts could apply to all. Yeah. Now, it would be harder to do that if you were building a great big huge chest of drawers, right? But you still can, you know. I started my woodworking journey making furniture for our infant son. Many of you that are older members might remember him coming in when he was like 6 and always wanting to win the 50-50. I think he might have won it once or twice. And he's 29 now, so that gives you an idea how long I've been hanging out here. And I tried to apply those same principles even back in the beginning. It's just part of how I am, right? And I'm not trying to in any way impose on you as woodworkers. Bottom line is do what brings you joy, right? I'm sharing with you an approach that works for me and results in objects, I believe well-crafted, that people understand the level of craftsmanship that goes into them. And it derives as a result of these various concepts that I'm speaking about. So.
What are some of the finest woodturning that I've seen in the country, East Africa, and South Florida? And down there things a little differently. But they would agree with the way you mentioned these different species and contrasting ways. The way that they achieve it is they get this heartwood, sapwood contrast. And they're very careful to use these large chunks to take advantage of that. It's something I really haven't seen done as well outside of that area, but they would very much agree with you in that regard.
So the comment for those on Zoom from what I remember was that there's a group of woodturners down in South Florida that apply a lot of the same principles, and they do so using wood with hardwood and sapwood contrast to try to achieve that same visual interest and level of elegance. So thank you for the comment. Is the presentation still going? Okay, good. Just going back and forth. Got it. Thank you. Okay, so boxes. Now, I watched the same survey you did, and making boxes didn't appear anywhere, right? So we're gonna try to change a little bit of that. I submit to you that well, these guys are having a party on my tabletop. I made those this year. That's these little modern laminate clocks that I make. So why would you want to build a box? Well, you know, I submit that box building is a great foundational skill builder, right? As if you're relatively new to woodworking. Acquiring the skills to make a little box like this, right? There's no moving parts, right? It's 3 pieces of wood and a bottom, right? To learn how to make this box, you would learn how to take raw lumber and convert it into, you know, square 4 sides. You'll learn how to thickness lumber to, you know, appropriate thicknesses. You learn how to cut a tenon and a mortise. You learn how to refine the box. You learn how to make little miter keys and glue them in and sand them down. And I would submit that an interested beginner that wanted to understand the world of woodworking would gain a lot of knowledge and skill development by striving to make a little box like this. Boxes also, they inspire curiosity. You can't walk up to a box and not open the lid and see what's inside, right? So they're in that way, there's that little box I just held up. In that way, they inspire curiosity. They're a great way to use little pieces of wood in a harmonious way. So again, to emphasize, this is the body, right? This is mahogany, and that's a lovely little piece of quilted maple. If I had reversed those colors, it would be the exact same box with the exact same materials, but it would not look good, right? So again, just to emphasize, you have to use your eye. To make great gifts, I think everybody in my family has a lot of little wooden boxes from the holidays and things like that. And they allow you to develop an aesthetic of your own that perhaps someday might lead you into a different place other than box making. When I first started working in wood, I made furniture. Didn't need any more furniture, so I started working smaller in scale. And I found this little niche that really works for me, and it's primarily boxes with legs and drawers. You've seen a lot of examples through the slides of boxes with legs and drawers. Some of them are one of a kind. I'll never make it again. Made it once. Others, like this little design that I call Temple. I've made 4-drawer, 5-drawer, 6-drawer versions. I've made 10 of each over time. And I enjoy every one of them, but they all employ the same principle. And if you can make a box of, oh, here's my little turning center. So I need shout out to Woodturning. So all of you who knew me pre-pandemic, I didn't know what a lathe was, right? And then we all learned new things. And like I said, I didn't learn how to bake bread. I went and bought a small lathe, and I built a grinding station, and I built a little tool rack. I'm a woodworker, right? And then I started taking classes down at the Maryland Hall for the Creative Arts in Annapolis. For those of you who aren't aware of that as a resource, I highly commend that you figure it out. Go talk to Matt, sitting right here. Matt is my teacher at the Maryland Hall. Great instructor, so I'll just say that. So now you owe me something next time, buddy. Really, really great instructor. And so I'm taking a series of classes from Matt, learning how to do more turnings. I'll bring some in one day for show and tell, I promise you. I made a spoon in a lathe. You know, that blew my mind. Like, really? A spoon in a lathe? Yes. So the Maryland Hall for the Creative Arts has got a great program down there for glass and ceramics and all kinds of things. And so I commend that if you're interested in learning about wood turning, if you're a newer woodworker, the classes are affordable. Matt's a great teacher. And so check it out. So that's where my little wood turning thing is. So as you evolve in making boxes, you're going to learn skills that are applicable to a lot of other varieties of woodworking, right? And if you could actually eventually evolve to making something like this, drawers, leg, box, harmonious, I submit that you could build anything you'd want to have in your house. At any scale you'd want to have it. I choose not to make furniture-sized things any longer because I don't need furniture-sized things, and I don't like working at that scale any longer. I enjoy working at this scale. But find some inspiration. I brought 3 books here. If you're new to box making, these 3 authors are kind of like these are the 3 books that I'd recommend. So this is Box Making Basics by a guy named David Friedman. If you never made a box in your life and you wanted to buy one book, I would buy this book. Okay, it goes into every fundamental single thing: how to make a bottom, how to send that around, how to cut joints. And these 2 other authors, Doug Stowe. Doug Stowe lives in Arkansas. This is another foundational book. He has 4 or 5 different books. And this guy, Tony Lidgate. Here you go. Tony Lidgate as well. These 3 authors they have a series of books. I'm a big believer in books. Until I started taking woodturning classes, I never took a class at all of my entire life in woodworking. I was all fully self-taught. Not that I don't enjoy the turning experience with Matt, but everything I've learned, I learned on my own, and I learned it through books. So those 3 books I highly commend. If you're interested in checking out making some boxes, they would walk you through the steps to make just about everything on this table except for drawers and legs. I haven't written that book yet. I need to get inspired to write that book someday. And then there's a lot of sources of inspiration. Here's this great book right here, published by Lark Books, 400 wood boxes. There's another one, 500 wood bowls. If you haven't seen that one, right? It's a series. They had 400 polymer beads. They wrote a series of books that focused on individual art forms. And there's like 400 wood boxes in here, right? That you can check out for ideas. I'm really proud that 3 of my boxes are in here, right? So you might have seen a couple of those on the slideshow. That's another good source of inspiration. So I commend to you the concept of thinking about working with a harmonious spirit in portions and designs and colors and use of your woods. Don't be in a hurry just to mill 2 pieces of walnut and put them together, right? And the figures clash. All of those elements come together, in my judgment, in the ability to create a woodworking project that you can be proud of for the rest of your life, right? And that's designed and built to last generations. Important to note that just because boxes are small, they are not immune to seasonal wood movement, right? So you have to consider that in your design elements. The back of these boxes like this, these panels actually float, and it's just the center stile that's glued in. These panels float in between, so they can expand and contrast, because this box wants to move that way in the carcass and the back wants to go that way, right? So these aren't immune to, like wood movement. You have to keep all those elements in mind. But I commend to you the box. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation, got a little bit out of it, maybe walk out of here thinking about making some boxes, or maybe apply some of these ideas to your own woodworking. Out of respect for time, I'm going to pause for any questions, and then I'll turn it back over to the moderator. Dave Hickson.
No question. It sounds to me like you make these refinements in the chair with.
This is the Zoom as well.
Technical question. It sounds to me like you make your refinements while sitting in a chair with the plane in one hand and the other hand. That asks you more over devices or something like that. Sort of how that works.
Yeah, good question. Some of the work needs to go in the box, right? I use a lot of hand cut dovetails. I can't cut that dovetail joint holding it in my hand. It's in a vise, and I'm working at the vise. But the point is that it's still slow, patient, elegant woodworking. So I use the gripping mechanisms that are necessary given the approach at hand. Cutting curves, sanding edges, and using a little block plane, I'm perfectly comfortable in the chair. Right? But I'm not going to have a really sharp chisel and cut that hand cut dovetail in my hand. Right? So it's a little above, actually. Thank you. David? And let me get the Zoom mic over here, Dave. Hang on. That way the people on Zoom can hear you. Okay. Waiting for it to turn green here.
Okay, great, okay. So, first of all, thank you. Your work, I've seen your work over many years. It's always just gorgeous. I'm curious, what would you cite as your inspirations for your aesthetics and your designs? I see some influences I might cite that I think, but I'm curious what you would say are your influences on your design choices.
Oh, that's a very good question. I can't name a woodworker in particular, but maybe I could relate to this my life experience. A lot of people look at my boxes with drawers, not so much the flat boxes, but boxes with drawers, and they're rocking with some sort of an Asian feel of some sort. And some of them were on the slideshow, again, Asian looking. That's not intentional. I don't try to achieve that. I didn't move to the United States until I was 15. I lived in Japan and Taiwan. And I wonder if in the early formation of imprinting memory, right, something got down deep inside the cortex that brings that out, right? Although I don't intentionally strive to do that. But this box with these curvy legs, and it kind of sort of has a little Asian feel to me, right? And when I get done, I'm like, man, it's an Asian looking box, so I can't make an American box. But anyways, that's the best I can do with that. So, question over here. Yeah, let me bring the Zoom mic, so I don't have to repeat the question.
Maybe a little bit of a strange question. A lot of us come to woodworking after a career in business or engineering or something like that. We often focus on techniques. I think you come to this as an artist. How would you advise us on how to get in touch with our inner artist?
Wow, that's a pretty good question.
Very heavy.
Yeah, I actually have 2 degrees in engineering. And I still work full-time in a 5 business laboratory. Go Dark. Did anybody watch Dark spacecraft crashing into an asteroid this week? Yeah. That was us. We did that. My wife and I were there at the laboratory. We crashed into it. Experiment. I guess the best I can answer that is gain a source of inspiration. Look at a lot of objects. Look at pictures of wood that's been done. Look at images. Look at the natural world around you and find an inspiration. Something that when you see it, your eye says, wow, that's cool, right? And then try to emulate that in wood. I mentioned my little sketchbook called came up after the meeting and flipped through this. There's like 497,000 crazy ideas that I never built, all right? That at the moment, I was inspired by something, I sketched them in my book, having to overcome 2 degrees in engineering's worth of training, right? It's an exercise. You have to be flexible in your brain, is the best I can tell you. I know that's probably not much of an answer, but that's really the best I can give you is find an inspiration that fires you up, that your eye says, I like that, and then try to make it.
You have to use the other side of your brain.
2 more questions. Where are we? Okay, let me bring this over more. So, hang on. There you go, right?
Okay. So my comment is similar to Paul, because I really see your artistic bent, which I would imagine started very early in your life. When did you, or did you not realize that you had an artistic bent?
I don't know that I still do.
Oh, absolutely.
The artist in my family is my living watch. She's a real artist. I'm just blessed to have a hobby that I can really enjoy, that brings pleasure when people acquire these objects, that pass down through their lives. These are heirloom objects. These are made to last for generations. These aren't disposable things, right? I feel like, you know that imposter syndrome thing, right? I feel like an imposter in trying to be an artist. I don't really feel like I am. I feel like I am a fine craftsman that just takes the time to create elegant things, use the principles.
Well, you're a very successful imposter then.
Yeah, thank you. If I could put a shameless plug, I'm sorry, shameless plug. I got some little flowers up here. Myself and all the wood boxes are going to be featured artists at the HorseSpirit Arts Gallery on October 16th for a gala grand opening of a show. Several of the boxes you saw in the slides are actually there. And I'm not looking for you to come out and buy a piece of day for. I just enjoy the support and have time to come by the gallery. It's a lovely gallery. Robert has tremendous things in there. Everything I make, I sell. I don't make these for personal consumption. I give a lot of things away to friends. So if you want to get on my friends list, let me know. The HorseSpirit Arts Gallery on October 16th. Come grab a flyer, please come join. So, one more question? Let me bring this back. So the Zoom. You guys are.
So you're working with a lot of small parts. Do you have special sheets for cutting on a jigsaw or router? Try to cut big pieces and then cut them into smaller, route bigger pieces and then cut them into smaller pieces.
Okay, I'll address that. So hopefully people on Zoom heard that. That's an outstanding question, and I apologize. I did speak about woodworking safety. These fingers don't get within 12 inches of anything stamped. I brought in for one of the jig rounds, I brought in my small part cutting jig that I built for my table saw. I actually got it out of Clarence Rannefeld's book on mitered laminates. He had a picture of the small part jig. Some of you might remember it. I could cut 1,000 pieces, 1/8 of an inch long, exactly the same using this jig. And my hands are 12 inches away from the blade. If I have to run something on a router table, I use push blocks, I have guards. You have to acquire some specialized techniques to be able to effectively and accurately machine small parts. And a lot of that is fixturing and jigs, right? And don't ever get your phalanges anywhere near a spinning tool, right? So I'm with the gentleman that wants to keep the 10 fingers. So thank you. Okay, I think we'll stop at that and turn it back over to the MC. Fired up like an astronaut.